Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Christy Coleman. I'm the Vice President of the LDC Gas Forums, and I'm super excited that you're joining us today. We are really going to hear some great stuff again from Trellis Energy and Douglas Allen. They did a webinar earlier this year, and I'm super excited that they're going to be sharing some more information with us. Trellis has been a great sponsor of the forums for many years and has been super supportive, even in this interesting time that we've had to do virtual sharing of information. But wow, they've got some great information to share. So I am, again, so glad that they've offered to collaborate together to send us this information. And Connie Rush, the Director of Sales, is going to be officially introducing Douglas for us. So thanks for joining us. I look forward to hearing from all of you through your questions. And I definitely am excited to hear from Douglas. So I'm going to turn it over to Connie.
Thank you, Christy. Hello, everyone. We're so pleased that you'll be attending our webinar today around a tool that we're all very familiar with, Spreadsheets. Douglas Allen will be our presenter today. And Douglas has a career spanning over 30 years in the natural gas industry, with his beginning roles being as a natural gas scheduler, moving through consultative roles, both commercially and private, and now with Trellis Energy as our Vice President of Sales and Services. And with all of our presentations, the engagement and participation of our audience are always very beneficial. So you'll notice on your screen, there's a question and answer dialog box. So if you'll post questions during the presentation, then Douglas will attempt to address those at the end. Also, if you should have any technical issues, that's a good place to notify us, and we'll try to help you out. So again, thank you so much for spending some time with us and giving us the opportunity to visit with you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Douglas.
Thank you, Connie. Appreciate that. So first off, let me say thank you again, everyone, for attending today. And, I hope with all the different things that we have going on that everybody is safe and sound over the holidays and that your family is doing well. So let me go ahead and jump in, as I'm sure folks are interested in hearing a little bit more about spreadsheets. So we've all done spreadsheet magic with, the spreadsheets over the years. I've certainly done my fair share of it, so it's easy to understand why people are so enamored of their spreadsheets. So at the end of the day, the use of spreadsheets is pretty universal, not just in the energy industry, but in virtually every industry. It's pretty ubiquitous. I don't think there's anybody or any industry that I'm aware of that is using spreadsheets in some manner. As I was doing a little bit of research around this particular webinar, I found out that 81% of us use Excel. There are a couple of other ones, but almost everybody here has used Excel or will be using Excel at some point. I understand why people are using spreadsheets. You can see to the right, I love spreadsheets. I think they're an important part of what we do and how we're approaching, our business. They provide a lot of flexibility. They give us the, ability to do some of the ad hoc modeling that we need to do. And let's face it, because of the way it's bundled in various Microsoft capabilities, again, assuming you're using Excel, it's a pretty low cost alternative for a pretty powerful tool. In my time in the industry and over the years, I've known a number of traders and gas schedulers and accountants. We all use spreadsheets as a part of our day-to-day business, and they're very effective. So let me go ahead and say it right here at the beginning. I love spreadsheets, and I'm not suggesting that we should get rid of them entirely. I think what we need to do is use them wisely within our business and make sure that we're taking the appropriate steps in leveraging them. So I'll be honest, over the years, I've also run entire pipelines on a spreadsheet, from gathering systems to regular transmission pipelines, et cetera. I've done the whole thing in a spreadsheet. So, I understand why we do it. I understand their place. And I've also been a part of the gas systems, the transactional management systems, and their place as well. So again, let me state from the beginning, spreadsheets are a great tool, and I think everybody should continue to use them, but you also need to understand where they have limitations. So we really do look at all the strengths, and I know that's what I tend to focus on, but we are overlooking some of the weaknesses of spreadsheets. Until just recently, they can really only be used and saved by one person at a time. There are some tools that have evolved that have helped us more with this, but again, it's still predominantly a single person's usage at a time. Over the years, I've seen that they become very large and complicated. You get long, kind of multi-argument formulas going on until it takes 30 minutes to decipher one. You'll often build formulas on formulas and, even link to other spreadsheets that are doing additional calculations. So I think we all recognize they can become very large and very complicated and really hard to know and verify. So you really need to look at that aspect of it and understand that spreadsheets can become so complicated and so convoluted that it's really tough to understand what the real calculations are telling you. So it takes a while to unravel those. I've also noticed that over the years, you can't, add entities very well. If you're adding a new company or you're adding a new location, then you've got to change columns. Adjusting your business cases can be very manual. And I don't know about you guys, but doing prior period adjustments in a spreadsheet, you've got to save off a version, then you enter numbers, et cetera. So there are limitations on what we can do here within these spreadsheets, and they represent some of the weaknesses that I'll talk about a little bit more and why they really represent risk within your business and your overall portfolio. The other thing that I have seen definitely when doing system implementations and moving into a gas system, and let me stop for a minute, and I'm using gas systems a little bit generically here, but this is the gas systems that are managing your transactions. Not talking about SCADA or field measurement, et cetera. This is about transactional systems where you're capturing your accounting. This is where it's your cash register. This is where people are going to pay dollars against that. So tracking these things within a system is very important, because I've seen in spreadsheets where people are putting in formulas in two different areas, trying to calculate the same number and getting different answers. And people are paying against those numbers in lots of cases. I've seen invoices go out wrong. I've seen statements used to file with states and federal governments go out wrong because the same number supposedly is being calculated in two different ways. So, and those are hard to spot. I've seen that go on in some cases as much as 10 years before an audit or a transition to a true gas system exposed that it was being calculated differently. And then, of course, one of my favorite things about spreadsheets and a little bit of weakness is who changed my formula, who went in and messed with it, for lack of a better term. So these are some of the things that I'm sure we've all experienced within spreadsheets, and why that can be a bit of a challenge, especially when you're working within a small organization and you're doing effectively your invoicing and billing out of it, or you're tracking your gas purchases, or deciding on a cash out if you're a pipeline. All of those things are going to be based on the numbers you've got here. And inevitably, these types of things, creep into your spreadsheets. So another aspect of it is, what I've really seen coming up recently is more and more focus on the spreadsheets and their role in the organization and the accounting from the audit perspective. One thing that I noticed the other day is that in a study I was reading, that few people that actually build these spreadsheets, and I've built several, have any formal training. It's one of those situations where as much as 80% of the people that are working on these spreadsheets don't have formal training, and even when it was offered, they didn't take it. So it's being built by average users like you and me, not necessarily professionals that have experience in writing systems and making sure they all tie out and adding all those audits. Single system of record, you're going to hear me refer back to this a couple of different times during this discussion. So this is a key point. Spreadsheets are susceptible to a number of challenges that come out that are somewhat unique. The corruption of data. I don't know about you guys, but I have had several instances where, I went to a network drive to pick up a spreadsheet and it wouldn't open. And from that point, I'd had to contact my IT group. I would have to then get a backup, which may be a day or a week old in some cases. So another challenge that I've run into out on network drives is just outright deletion of the file when you go in the next morning and you're trying to pull it up. And then of course, the frequency of the backups is important too. The auditors are aware of this and they're looking at it and saying, you know, that's critical data that you based financial information on, and it's at risk. Additionally, you know, they're looking at Sarbanes-Oxley compliance. If you have that need, Section 404 of that is more and more being a focus for these advisory and audit firms to go look at it and say, are you following the processes and the best practices outlined there? It's very interesting to me that spreadsheets represent one of the areas where we don't put as much diligence into our controls. It's such a familiar tool that we end up, you know, skipping some steps there. Whereas if you look at a gas management system, a gas transaction system, it's very regimented. It's controlled. The IT group looks at it. There are documented key controls in place, et cetera. Spreadsheets, for whatever reason, we tend to be a lot less informal about, and that creeps into our processes. And the auditors are noting this. And more when, for instance, Connie and I are out, you know, working in the sales arena and talking to different companies, more and more, I'd say, you know, probably almost 50% of the time, folks that are using spreadsheets to do their current accounting or tracking of their purchases, sales, transport volumes, et cetera, are mentioning that they've been listed as an exception now in the reports from the auditors because of their spreadsheets. So it is also, you know, a challenge when the auditors come in. It's really hard to know who changed what in the spreadsheet. There is no formal auditing. You can't tell who had access when based on data changes or formula or structural changes. So those are all kind of manual documented processes with spreadsheets. When you're working with a system, and it's the system of record, all of those things are tracked, all of that's captured in the database, and that's a pretty key point that the auditors are focusing on. Another challenge that you'll end up running into with spreadsheets is obviously who can change what. As soon as you get into the spreadsheet, yes, you can use the cell protections, you can use the sheet, you know, passwords and those types of things. But once you have access to the spreadsheet, you can pretty much change whatever you need to. That's what has been my experience in looking at a lot of the spreadsheets when doing implementations. Now, there are some organizations where that doesn't apply and they've really leveraged the technology within Excel, but that's the exception, not the rule. So intuitively, the more complex the spreadsheet is, and let's all acknowledge here, and I certainly will, you know, you build formulas on formulas and it gets complex pretty quickly. If you start to add more and more data covering multiple years, even multiple months, if you're doing a number of deals or you've got a lot of shippers transporting, et cetera, those things add complexity, and you're using it daily and you're accumulating data daily. So the more you do that, inherently the more risk is being taken on in the spreadsheet to have any of the items that I've listed above, whether it's corruption of data, deletion, somebody changes something and you're not aware of it and it changes a key calculation. All of these things represent risk to your business, to your financials, and to your reporting or invoicing. So it can impact any number of areas within your business. So another aspect of spreadsheets that I think is important to point out as a bit of a limitation on why not have that be your system of record is the bigger the spreadsheet, the slower it is. I've seen them get to the point where you actually run out of memory on your PC. They can also be really hard to navigate. You almost need training. And how many people have seen written formal training on an Excel spreadsheet? I don't think I have. The other aspect you'll end up running into is the single author. Generally, there's one or two people that will build some of these complex spreadsheets within your organization. And then what happens when they leave? Where's the continuity? Where's the you know, business practice that's going to go forward? And soon, if that happens, pretty soon people are just entering numbers into cells and getting an outcome, and they're not really sure how that, you know, gets calculated. So that's another challenge that you'll run into with spreadsheets over time. And then, of course, the multiple users, as I talked about before. Another aspect of why spreadsheets may not be the ideal tool is because of the standardization that you'll need and the formatting around reports. How do you do those? Well, it's nice because you can create and do things more on the fly. It does represent a challenge in getting a consistent answer, especially if you have multiple people using the spreadsheet. So before I continue, let me also remind everybody that, again, you can submit questions. I'm trying to make sure that I'm watching those as they come in. So if you have one, I'll try and answer it as time goes on. So feel free to do that. Okay, so if you're going to move off of a spreadsheet, you say, okay, Douglas, I can understand. I've got a little checkbox, and I've got all of these different things that you're mentioning. We do have large spreadsheets. We are running our daily business on them. We are using it to invoice. These are all kind of checkboxes you should look for. Then what is the answer? What is something that you can use to do it? Again, a key item here would be, ultimately, you've got to have a reasonable cost versus the business revenue or cost to secure the gas. And I'll speak more to this a little bit later. But these are, again, more high-level points. If you're going to move to a system, you need to make sure it covers 80 to 90% of what your business is looking for. Some people would pause there and say, well, wait a minute, should I get 100% coverage for my business? What I will tell you is that, gas transaction systems rarely cover 100% of everything. So to be economical and to fit the point number one around reasonable cost, generally you're going to have some amount of items that you will keep off in a spreadsheet, et cetera. So, and let me speak to that for just a second. Again, I'm not saying eliminate your spreadsheets. I would use them in conjunction with, and that speaks to the point number three is that the spreadsheets need to be able to interact with your gas system. You need to be able to move data in and out of it to allow you the flexibility and the tools that you need to kind of transact your normal day-to-day business. But ultimately, that can't be your system of record. So look for something that's going to work well as in combination. You'll need to leverage it quickly. Spreadsheets are easy to come up to speed on for the most part, unless they're really massive. And you want a system that's going to be able to do the same thing for you. For smaller companies, that can be as little as 30 days. I'm a little bit conservative here in saying 1 to 2 months. For larger companies, that can be 3 to 4. If you are a truly large company, like one of the ones that we have is, Duke Energy, it took them more 12 or longer, but they're a substantial company with, 5 jurisdictions across, a couple of different states with business rules. But for smaller companies and most companies that are doing business on spreadsheets today, these are probably pretty realistic timeframes to move off to a system. I talked earlier about being able to be scalable and to meet your needs, and I'll speak to this again, each of these points a little bit more in a few minutes. But you want to make sure that it's scalable, that when you get into a system, you're not kind of locked in and that's all it can do, because ideally, I think all of us want our business to grow, to expand, and then to, have the system work, not invest in it and then go, oops, can't really continue to work with and do what I need to do. Lastly, and this one's important, and I'm going to speak to this a couple of different ways, but the auditing requirements, as I noted a few minutes ago, are becoming more and more stringent and becoming more and more noticeable, but cybersecurity. So cybersecurity is a big deal these days. Whenever you're doing something that's going out into the cloud, when you're digitizing, all of those things, cybersecurity is very critical. A lot of our organizations are spending a lot of time and focus on this particular item. So you want to make sure that your data, when it's anywhere, whether it's on your network or in the cloud, et cetera, that is secure. Okay, so I've given you a lot of reasons around, why spreadsheets are good and why spreadsheets are maybe not so good, as a tool to use for managing your business end to end on. So now let's talk a little bit about why we tend to find people are hesitant to move off of their spreadsheets. Number one, probably not a big surprise, cost. So because spreadsheets are bundled in with, typically, again, I'll go back to Excel, they're bundled in with Microsoft. For the end users, it looks like, oh, okay, that's no cost. But if you really think about the cost of using spreadsheets, it really comes in resources and people. The people to, put the spreadsheet together, the people to verify the spreadsheet, the people to maintain the spreadsheet, et cetera. So that's a little bit of a hidden cost here. And I think when you really look at the time and effort around maintaining and creating these spreadsheets and really documenting them, you'll find that there is a cost. It's just a little bit softer cost, and it's not, you're writing a check day over day. So that is one of the top barriers that we see. And I'll speak to that in a minute, as I transition into more solutions. The other thing is just change. You're familiar with your spreadsheets, you're comfortable with your spreadsheets. In some cases, you've been using them for years. So we all like to be comfortable. And I know I certainly do. So it's just adversity to change. Then you may have a very complicated spreadsheet today. Unraveling that can sometimes represent a little bit of uncertainty for you and a barrier to saying, wow, we know we need a system. We know we need to move off of spreadsheets, but we're not even sure exactly how the current one's working. And now we've got to unravel that, and who's going to do that? So that can sometimes be a barrier to change and the need to move to a system. It's just, it's one of those things. You have to look at it. And again, less about unraveling your current spreadsheet. If you know your business, then you'll be fine. Last one is just budgeting, or excuse me, number 4 is budgeting. You've got to fit it within your budgeting cycle. We know that each of the industries has its own different budgeting cycle, whether it's rate cases, whether it's going before a PUC, could even just be your company's yearly budgeting cycle. So, even in times when we talk to people, they're like, well, we don't have budget this year. And then by the time you get around to the budgeting cycle, your focus is, somewhere else. So this is another thing that you need to look at and understand, that it can be a barrier to switching, but it's very manageable. And then lastly, it goes back to just, well, I have enough people. Doing what I'm doing today, I can get by. But if you told me I had to implement a system, well, I'm not sure I have all the people to do that. What I'm going to tell you is, as I said before, and if you're got a small spreadsheet and you're looking to make a change, it can be as little as 30 to 60 days. So it's not the resource investment that you necessarily think it is. So these are the reasons that I often see why people are unwilling to change and unwilling to make that switch. They're all valid, but I think they're also, you're able to overcome them with a little bit of planning and a little bit of effort. This is my safety blanket. This is one of my favorite pictures in the whole thing. We all love the comfort of our blanket, and that's how I feel about spreadsheets. And the energy industry is no different about that. All of us enjoy that safety. So I've talked to you about, why spreadsheets are good, why they can represent a challenge and where those challenges are, and why you might not want to change. Well, as one of my old bosses used to say to me is, Douglas, don't come to me and present a problem if you're not going to give me some sort of solution. So that's what we've done here at Trellis. We've tried to look at these things. We've spent a lot of time and effort, and we really are focused on how do we run your business smarter. And we've tried to address these things within Trellis. So again, when I come back to it and I take a really simple, approach, common sense approach is what I try and do. I look at it and I say, these are the items that are must-haves. You've got to have coverage for your business and for your regulatory needs. Regulatory is kind of not optional. You got to have it. You got to be able to report out of it. You've got to be able to meet all of those needs. Because we're talking about the cloud, everybody's talking about the cloud. Cybersecurity is critical. You've got to be comfortable that whatever solution you're going with is going to be secure and your data is going to be secure. Reliability, you want it to work when you need it, when you're, looking at an ID3 cycle change and you need to, update a scheduled quantity or whatever it is, you need it available. It's a 24/7 kind of job, especially as we continue to move towards electricity. Performance. This one on the surface seems pretty intuitive, right? Well, I need it to perform no matter how much data I have. Well, for most people using spreadsheets, you don't necessarily have a lot of data. What you really need is a system that is going to perform even when you have a low bandwidth kind of situation. So it needs to be written very well and very tightly, as we like to say, so that you can have performance, whether you're at home, whether you're out at a soccer game for your children, what have you. And you need it even when you're on your cell phone to be able to perform. So that's all about efficiency and how it's written, and that it can handle both high bandwidth, low bandwidth, lots of data, little data. You need it to perform when and where you need it. And then, of course, always my favorable one, which is reasonable cost. Again, it can't be a fortune if you're going to have any kind of business case to move off of spreadsheets. And we understand that. All right, so one of the things about Trellis that we're very proud of is that it's very intuitive. It's very easy to use, it's straightforward. It doesn't take a lot of time for you to quickly come up to speed on, just like spreadsheets. We've worked very hard to make sure that the interface is easy to use and it's easy for your folks and yourself to adopt. As I spoke about implementations, again, they can be very quick. But here's another key point about implementations is we need to make sure that you're participating. So you should be driving right alongside us and make sure that you're comfortable and that you understand how the system works, because ultimately you're going to be the ones doing it. We really like to make you self-sufficient as a part of this. And I think any implementation you do of a gas management system, you should be right there. We don't, we'll always be right there for and available for you, but we shouldn't be in your back pocket all the time. So, this is an important thing that you're self-sufficient at the end of it. So as time goes on, you're going to need to scale. Ideally, again, all of our businesses are growing, changing, and evolving. You need to be able to have more and more functionality available to you. So we took a very modular approach here at Trellis so that you can have the ability to choose the things that you need so that we can, again, keep the cost reasonable. You don't want to be paying for things that you don't need at this time. You want to make sure that you can, get the modular type approach, which allows the functionality that you need today and tomorrow and going on. So again, another area where we have focused is spreadsheets. So again, I think there's a great place for this, as a scheduler, keeping track of all the different volumes going to different places, title transfers, looking at where I've got cuts, moving gas around. Those are all things that you really need to be very quick and very concise on. So we've made sure that you can quickly and easily import those nominations into and out of Trellis, schedule quantities, measurement amounts, tariff rates, etc. Those are things that it's a cut and paste kind of exercise to get in and out of our Trellis SAS. So, another aspect of that is making sure that you can get data in, but it's never any good when you put a bunch of information into a system and you can't get it out. So all of the grids inside Trellis, you can export to Excel in a nice usable format. And that's one of the things that our customers really appreciate, is the ability to leverage the data and to make sure that they can both get it in there quickly and easily, that it's very visible within the system, but also to be able to take it out to leverage some of those capabilities, pivot reporting being a big one. That's why we provide reporting views and grids that allow you to get your data kind of, where you're not having to do all these joins, and make sure that you can quickly and easily access the data. All right, so again, back to the system of record, as I told you I would. At the end of the day, you need an auditable system of record. You need to be able to understand who accessed what, who changed what, and be able to report on that. Again, that's critical for SOX, it's critical for your IT controls, access controls, etc. And these are things that spreadsheets aren't going to be able to do. As a user though, at the end of the day, you need it to work every day, all day. And Trellis does. We're available anytime, anywhere, any device. If you have, a up-to-date browser, you can access our system through a URL. I talked about performance earlier. Speed is built in from day one. We don't come back at the end and try and tune. We're tuning all the way through when we're building these to make sure they're going to perform for you. Cloud-based. Again, all these companies, everything you're hearing in the market is about digitalization. Wow, that's a mouthful. And moving to the cloud and cloud computing. So we're in a modern cloud-based architecture. We have proven cybersecurity. It's a big focus for us. We partner with the majors. With Oracle, we've been a long-time Oracle partner. We're doing more with Azure these days from Microsoft. One of our clients is already in Azure, running Trellis today. So we're tapping into the investments that those big boys out there are making in cybersecurity and leveraging that on your behalf. Lastly, and probably to me, one of the more important points is the recovery and uptimes. So as I mentioned before, if your spreadsheet gets corrupted, if if somebody goes and makes a change to a formula and you've got to, figure out when did that occur and how do I back that out? And, so trying to track that across multiple saves or sheets can be very challenging. So at Trellis, we've got our public SaaS, our standard SaaS system for these systems, and we have 99.5 uptime. So it's there when you need it. Now, down here at the bottom, we've got what we call RPO and RTO. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not the most technical in the world, and I had to look these up. So what that means is that if you hit that 99.5% and you still run into a problem, we never have to date, but if you did, then we're willing to contractually commit to the fact that you will never lose more than 15 minutes of data. Can you say that about your spreadsheet? So that's what RPO is about, is your recovery point. For all practical purposes, with the technology that we use, the replication is in the seconds. So the 15 minutes is just for contractual purposes. But realistically, I would say you're a minute or less worth of data if you were to ever have a problem. Again, you generally won't. RTO is about how quickly we can stand the system back up for you if we had to switch over. We use a very robust architecture, so we're able to make sure that you'll have nothing more than 2 hours of downtime if you ever encountered that in the unlikely event. So I don't know about you guys, but when I had a problem with a spreadsheet, I had to go to the IT group. They had to go check the backups, and hopefully the backups worked. And then it could take 2 to 3 days just to get that spreadsheet restored and ready for me to use. So 2 hours worth of downtime is not much. So if you're in the middle of, the end of the month or the first of the month when you're trying to trade during bid week, et cetera, worst you'll have to encounter is 2 hours. Again, it's not anything we've even had to use because of our uptime. Okay, so I talked about cost a little bit earlier, and I wanted to circle back to this. Reasonable cost for these types of systems. Again, I know you have to work within budgeting and other aspects of it. So, price is always going to be important. But think about this for a minute. And I really took a moment to just kind of ponder this the other day. If you're moving 25,000 decatherms a day, let's say you're doing gas supply or gas procurement, if you're in an LDC or you're a marketer or you're an AMA, et cetera. If you're purchasing 25,000 decatherms a day at $2 a decatherm, and by the way, I think it's trading at $2.45 today at Henry Hub. So at $2 a day, that's almost $18 million a year in commodity costs. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not sure I want to run my $18 million business on a spreadsheet and count on that. So, and again, I think these are very low numbers. 25,000. I would hazard to guess that a lot of people on this video today, on the video webinar, are moving far more than that. So when you think about the proportion of the amount of dollars that you're putting out there at risk on a spreadsheet, at the price points that we provide here at Trellis, even with these low numbers, it's less than 0.5%. So from a costing perspective, it seems to make intuitive and common sense. Wow, that's a pretty fractional amount to invest to make sure I've got a system of record that my auditors will be okay with, that I can validate and put controls around, that I can be confident that the vendor has designed in a professional manner and meets my business needs. All of that for less than 0.5%. That set me back for a second to just think about that. So cost-wise, I think you can find very reasonable alternatives to your spreadsheet. So again, I think that modular functionality, again, pay for what you need. A good example of this is, let's say today that you don't have any storage, but next year, next month, 5 years from now, you decide we're going to add storage to our portfolio, either as a pipeline that's going to offer a storage facility, or if you're a marketer or a gas supply person that's going to acquire storage, and then you decide you want to use NNS functionality. Well, you don't need that day one, but as time goes on, we can offer that to you. You contact Connie, for instance, and she's more than happy to work with you, and then we just turn it on. It's already in our system, But again, from day one, if you don't need it, don't pay for it. That's only going to help the cost factor. And again, as I said, you can add the modules as your business grows. And generally, when we see that, when you're taking on something new, a new service, or using something like storage, it's because you've increased your business in some manner. So it generally makes sense when you're taking on new revenue and new items. It's a little bit easier to kind of, make that happen and add the functionality that you need with the system when you have that kind of revenue coming in to support it. So I think cost can be overcome. I think you can find very reasonable alternatives at this point. Keep clicking through it. So Trellis is a single platform. Again, we go back to the modular functionality, but we cover multiple business segments. We can cover your gathering needs from wellheads into your interconnecting pipelines. We cover regulated and non-regulated pipelines. So whether you're an intrastate or a regulated pipeline, for those of you with regulated pipelines, we handle the regulatory and NASB compliance that you'll need. If you're running storage or you have storage in association with your pipeline, as I was just referencing to a minute ago, we have functionality there. A big area for us in an expansion, again, I referred to Duke Energy previously, that's Piedmont Natural Gas, the supply logistics, your gas supply and procurement needs. We cover those areas as well. One of our core areas is also the distribution part and dealing with your customer choice programs to make sure that your end users get supply. Or even if you don't have choice programs, we can help you with the distribution aspects and the end user transports. And then an area that we've been more and more moving into is the consumer billing. We've always done C&I, but we're also moving into some of more of the residential type billings. At the end of it, having a single platform that allows you the ability to scale and to grow your business is not something you're going to be able to do in a spreadsheet for any length of time. And especially not in meeting the various compliance and items that you need from that perspective, from an audit, from controls, and from just a business common sense perspective. And lastly, I'll say that, again, I understand each segment has different budgeting timelines, rate case cycles, et cetera. At Trellis, we're used to that. We've worked across these businesses and we've worked in these businesses. So if you have a little bit longer time frame, we have folks out there that we've been talking to that, actually won't really even need to make a decision until 2023. So we recognize, again, that these things take time, and we'll work with you to help craft these proposals internally so that you can justify and help understand why you need to move to a gas system. Okay, we move on to the question and answer portion. So give me just a second to read a couple of these and then I'll respond. Let me pull up my panel real quick. So I had a question from Andrew. It said, effectively, that he's been in the natural gas industry for some time. At one point he was using spreadsheets and he's moved over. And really at this point, he's asking, the true question is, what is your experience on how many market participants are still in spreadsheets and in that kind of stage of development? I would say, small company, it's probably 70+% would be my guess that are still using spreadsheets as their main system. Larger companies, again, where there's, multi-million dollars worth of revenue, et cetera, I think those companies have invested in and always have in large systems. But in the small to medium sized, companies, I would say majority of them are still on spreadsheets. That makes it, a little bit easier for them to deal with day over day. And again, those barriers have kind of maybe held them back. So I have another question here. What is the best way to use spreadsheets with a gas system? So let me speak to that for just a minute. And I know I'm running a little short on time here. So at the end of the day, I think, to me, as I was illustrating before, spreadsheets have a place. And that is to be flexible, to allow you to quickly be on the phone or an IM or a video call, quickly crunch numbers, et cetera. And then from there, move that information over to Trellis or gas system, and let the system then automate the rest of it. Let me give you an example. As a scheduler, if you're working in the gas supply segment and you're out there trying to schedule gas across multiple pipelines, et cetera, you've lined up all your purchases and sales. In an ideal world, you would just quickly upload those into Trellis. Trellis would have EDI connections to your regulated pipelines, so it would take it from there. It would automate those, push them over to the pipeline so that you don't have to go into their EDBs or their CAWs. And then from there, pull back the scheduled quantities. To me, that would be one of the best ways to use this. What I often see customers do is they'll have the spreadsheet and they're going and entering these nominations, so they have that aspect of it. Then at the end of the month, they're quickly, trying to upload these or manually retype these into their system so they quote unquote have a system of record. And I don't think that's the best approach. If you're going to do this, you need to work and have it really be a symbiosis between your spreadsheet and your system, so that there's quick transitions back and forth so that they become kind of almost an extension of each other, not trying to use it as an end of day or end of month, because I never see that really be successful. There's tie outs. It's just adding more work to your plate to have to try and audit those things. All right, let me see if I can take one more. Okay, do you have customers in Canada can handle multiple units, gigajoules and MMBTUs? So currently, we do not have any customers. Trellis does not have any customers in Canada. We have done some work up in Canada before. Previously, again, we're a Silicon Valley based, innovative shop. And so we've done some work in Canada in the past. Multiple units, yes, we can handle multiple units between gigajoules and MMBTUs, decatherms. That's an easy conversion. Ideally what we'll do is put that into the system and basically use one uniform measure, but then we can convert it so it shows in the other units. But generally you're going to find most of these systems will have a base unit and then do those conversions for you to handle the cross-border either businesses, purchases, sales, etc. Let me give you another example where this is probably relevant. Again, I'm going back to Duke a little bit. They actually just went live. So one of their states is in MCF. So they do all of their billing, all of their information is done in MCF. The rest of their jurisdictions are all done in MMBTUs. So that's probably a closest example that I can give you there to gigajoules versus MMBTUs in your example. So, all right, I think I'm running a little bit long here. So there's a couple of questions that did come in that I have not had the opportunity to answer. So I'll take a moment and after the webinar and go ahead and respond to those questions, maybe reach out to you. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to sit and hear some of our thoughts and to be here with us. I want you guys to have a safe and Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. So really appreciate everybody. Thank you.